He sat at the far corner of the luxurious restaurant, always at the same table, always at the same hour, always alone. People whispered about him the moment he entered, though he never heard any of it. His name was Mr. Alden Crowell, one of the wealthiest men in the entire city, yet he lived in a world of complete silence, a world he had been forced into after a sudden illness took away his hearing years earlier. From that day forward, everything became mechanical, meals at the same place, expressions rehearsed, gestures precise, and emotions tightly locked away, like treasures sealed behind unbreakable vault doors. Although he couldn't hear their voices, he understood their stares. Some pitied him, others envied him. A few feared him, and many wondered how a man so rich could look so painfully empty. On that warm afternoon, sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the restaurant, painting golden ribbons across the tablecloth. Mr. Alden sliced his food with robotic precision, barely tasting it, barely present. His silence was a fortress nobody dared to enter. Nobody, except fate. At the opposite side of the restaurant, a young cleaning woman named Marisol hurried between tables, trying not to draw attention. She was small, thin, and always looked slightly exhausted, yet she carried an air of quiet strength. In her arms was her baby girl, only 8 months old, wrapped in a worn pink blanket. The manager normally didn't allow her to bring the child, but she had no choice that day. No one to watch the baby, no money for a sitter, and no days left to miss work. Marisol whispered apologies as she wiped tables one-handed, rocking the baby with the other arm. The child, with big dark eyes and soft curls, watched everything with fascination. Every spoon, every glass, every light, every movement. She seemed unusually aware for her age, almost as if she sensed things others couldn't. And then, in one moment that would change absolutely everything, the baby caught sight of Mr. Alden. Her eyes widened. She stopped moving. She stared at him with a stillness so intense that even Marisol felt it, but she didn't understand. She only thought her daughter was fascinated by the lonely rich man who always dined there. But the truth was something no one could imagine. The baby lifted her tiny hand toward him, and then she did something impossible, something that made everyone stop, everyone watch, and everyone feel a chill run down their spine. Before anyone could react, she wiggled out of her mother's arms and toddled, unsteadily, but with a strange determination, straight toward the table of the silent millionaire. Marisol gasped and ran after her, terrified that she had just committed the mistake that could cost her the only job she had. But the baby didn't hesitate. She reached Mr. Alden's table, stretched her hand upward, and gently touched the back of his fingers, as though she had known him forever, as though she had been waiting for him. And in that instant, in that impossible, unimaginable instant, Mr. Alden froze. He felt something he had not felt in years, something that would unravel everything he believed about silence, destiny, and miracles. He looked down at the child, and the child smiled at him, a smile so warm, so strangely knowing, that for the first time in a very long time, he felt afraid, not of her, but of what her presence meant, because deep within him, in the silence he had accepted as permanent and eternal, a faint sound stirred, a memory of a sound, a whisper of a sound, a breath of something impossible, a beginning. And it all started with a baby he had never seen before, a baby who should not have been there, a baby who seemed to carry something no ordinary child could ever carry. Marisol reached the table breathless, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely think. Her first instinct was pure panic. She grabbed her daughter gently but firmly, whispering, rushed apologies to the wealthy man who now sat motionless, his hand still where the baby had touched it. She expected anger. She expected him to gesture for the manager. She expected humiliation. But instead, he just stared, not at her, but at the child. His eyes, usually lifeless and cold, were strangely unsettled, almost searching for something he couldn't name. Marisol noticed it and felt a strange, inexplicable shiver. She hugged her baby close, bowing her head repeatedly, ready for the consequences. But Mr. Alden lifted a hand, slowly, hesitantly, motioning for her not to leave. Marisol froze in place. She didn't understand the gesture at first, but then realized he was asking her to stay. He pointed gently to the chair across from his, a silent invitation. Impossible. Absurd. A billionaire asking a cleaning woman, especially one with a baby, to sit with him in a place like that. It made no sense. The restaurant manager, seeing the scene unfold, nearly fainted. He approached, anxiously but halted when Mr. Alden shot him a sharp look, silent yet authoritative. The message was clear: leave them alone. People stared, whispered, wondered. Marisol slowly lowered herself onto the chair, still trembling, clutching the baby as though shielding her from a world that didn't belong to them. She didn't want to meet the man's eyes, but she couldn't avoid noticing how intensely he watched her daughter, not with suspicion or annoyance, but with something that looked almost like fear and confusion, deep confusion. He tapped lightly on the table, trying to gather the courage to communicate something. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small notepad, and wrote a short sentence before sliding it toward her. Marisol hesitated, then read it. "What is her name?" She blinked in surprise. Of all questions she expected, none had been that gentle. "Her name is Alma," she whispered instinctively, though she knew he couldn't hear her voice. So she repeated it slowly, pointing to the baby, mouthing the word clearly. "Alma." Mr. Alden nodded, writing again, his fingers slightly shaking. "How old?" Marisol mouthed. 8 months. He nodded again, this time harder, as though this specific detail affected him more than it should. His jaw tightened. His breathing grew shallow. He pressed the pen to the page but paused before writing the next question. His hand hovered, trembling. Marisol felt her stomach twist. Why did he care? What did he want? Why did he look both terrified and mesmerized by her child? He finally wrote something and slid the notepad again. It was only 2 words, but those 2 words made Marisol's blood run cold. Born when? Why? Why would that matter? Still, she answered, mouthing the date as clearly as possible. January 7th. The reaction was immediate. Mr. Alden's entire posture stiffened. His eyes widened in a way Marisol had never seen from him. Not on the news, not in public appearances, not in any rumor whispered about the eccentric rich man of the city. For the first time he looked human, overwhelmingly human, fragile even. He wrote again, faster this time, sliding the paper with urgency. Where? Marisol hesitated. There was something unnerving about how desperately he wanted that information. She mouthed the name of the small clinic on the edge of town, a place he surely had never heard of. But the moment she said it, his expression changed again, this time to something darker, more haunted. His fingers curled into fists. His, breathing quickened. He looked at Alma as though he were staring at a ghost, and then he shook his head violently, as if trying to reject some terrible thought forming inside him. He pushed the notepad aside and reached for his glass of water with unsteady hands. But even then, he kept glancing at the baby, again and again, each time with increasing dread. Marisol, terrified and confused, clutched Alma protectively, and then the impossible happened again. Alma reached out toward him a second time, slow, intentional, unmistakably aware. Her little hand touched the back of his wrist, and once more, he froze. But this time his reaction was stronger. His eyes fluttered shut, his body shuddered, and he inhaled sharply, through fear, through disbelief, through something he had not felt since the day silence swallowed his world. A sound, not loud, not clear, but a sound, a faint echo, like someone calling from far underwater, a memory of a voice, a sound of something lost, returning. He opened his eyes and stared at the baby in astonishment, his whole world tilting. Marisol felt the air shift, as if something sacred or dangerous had just been awakened. For the first time since losing his hearing, Mr. Alden placed a trembling hand against his own ear, trying to understand what was happening to him, trying to understand why it was happening, and why it was happening now. Because deep inside, beneath the layers of silence, beneath the years of isolation, beneath the armor he'd built around his heart, a question rose like a shadow he couldn't escape. Who is this child? And why does she make him hear the impossible? Something connected them, something he feared to confront, something buried in his past, something that could destroy everything if revealed. And part of him already knew. The answer would not be simple, not harmless, not anything he was prepared to face, because destiny had just arrived at his table, and it had come in the form of a baby girl who was never supposed to cross his path. The restaurant felt different now, charged, electric, as though the air itself sensed something extraordinary unfolding in front of everyone. Conversations hushed. Forks paused mid-air. Even people who had no idea what was happening felt an invisible pull toward the table where the silent billionaire and the cleaning woman sat. Marisol held Alma tightly, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and wonder. She couldn't explain why her daughter had reacted this way. Why? The baby seemed drawn to the man like a magnet. She had seen Alma act curious before. Babies grabbed things, stared at strangers, smiled randomly. That was normal. But this wasn't normal. This was something else. Something older, deeper, and unsettlingly precise. The way Alma touched him. The way she looked into his eyes, as though she recognized him, as though she'd been waiting. And the way he reacted, terrified, fascinated, undone. Mr. Alden rubbed his fingers slowly, exactly where the baby had touched him, his expression a chaotic mixture of hope and dread. He wasn't breathing properly, and Marisol could see it. His chest rose too fast, too sharp, like a man fighting to control the storm inside him. He grabbed his pen again, but this time he didn't write calmly. His hand shook violently, the letters sharp, uneven, almost desperate. He pushed the paper toward her. Why did she touch me like that? Has she done this before? Marisol read the question twice, unsure how to respond. She mouthed an uncertain no, then added silently, "She never acts like this. Never." He exhaled shakily, the fear deepening in his eyes. Fear of a baby. Marisol's pulse pounded as she tried to make sense of everything. But then Alma did something that made both of them freeze. She reached again, not for his hand this time, but for his face. Her small palm pressed against his cheek, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity far beyond her 8 months of life. The moment her skin touched his, Alden's entire body went rigid. His breath hitched sharply. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Something trembled through him, like a jolt, like recognition, like memory. The room around him blurred. A wave of dizziness pulled at his senses, but worse than any of that was the sound. A sound that wasn't supposed to exist. A whisper, a faint ghost-like echo, like someone calling his name not with lungs, but with memory itself. He jerked back abruptly, almost knocking over his glass. The room watched in silent shock. Marisol instinctively stood, clutching Alma tightly, ready to run, tears welling in her eyes from sheer confusion and fear. But Alden reached forward, his hand trembling violently, not to push them away, but to stop them from leaving. His eyes were pleading. For the first time in years, he needed answers. He scribbled something else, sliding the paper toward Marisol with a shaking hand that betrayed how close he was to breaking. Does she hear things other babies don't? Marisol stared at the words. What kind of question was that? How could a baby hear differently? But then her mind drifted, unwillingly, to small moments she had brushed aside. The way Alma sometimes turned her head toward empty corners of the room as if listening to something distant. The way she stared into people's faces like she saw more than their features. The way animals reacted strangely around her, either approaching with high affection or retreating fearfully. The way Alma had cried inconsolably the night before, pointing insistently at the front door when no one was there. Tiny things, odd things, things Marisol never had the luxury to analyze because life demanded too much of her. But now, those moments echoed in her mind with uncomfortable clarity. Before she could respond, Alden wrote again, harder this time, pen digging into the paper. Did anything strange happen on the day she was born? Her stomach dropped. Yes, something had happened, something she never told anyone, something she herself couldn't explain, something the doctors dismissed, but she never forgot. Her breath trembled as memories she had buried clawed their way back to the surface. The storm that came out of nowhere, the lights flickering in the clinic, the machines malfunctioning, the strange humming sound that everyone heard for only a moment and then denied, the midwife who crossed herself 3 times and whispered that the child was marked with purpose. Marisol had convinced herself it was all coincidence, exhaustion, fear, the chaos of childbirth. But now the millionaire, this deaf, broken man, was reacting to her baby in a way no one else ever had. And the moment Alma touched him, something impossible stirred inside him. Something no doctor, no specialist, no treatment had ever been able to restore. A spark of sound, a spark of life, a spark of truth. Alden leaned closer, his expression haunted. the kind of look a person has when they are standing inches away from a truth they have avoided for years. He wrote again, slower now, almost painfully. Has anyone else felt strange around her? Marisol hesitated. Her heart pounded. She looked at her daughter, this small, warm bundle of innocence, and suddenly felt an unfamiliar fear run through her. What was this man sensing? What did he see? What did he know? She shook her head slowly, though she wasn't sure if it was true, or if she simply didn't want it to be true. But Alden seemed to see through her uncertainty. He wasn't looking at her now. He was looking at Alma with an expression that was neither fear nor wonder, but recognition, as though he had seen something like this before, long ago, in a life he tried to forget. His hand hovered over the notepad again, his eyes darkening with something heavy and unspoken. But this time he didn't write a question. He wrote a sentence that made Marisol's breath stop entirely, a sentence that made her knees weaken, a sentence that made Alma suddenly quiet, as if she understood every letter. I think I know who she is. And before Marisol could react, before fear or denial or disbelief could take shape in her mind, he wrote another line beneath it, his fingers trembling uncontrollably. For a long moment, the restaurant felt like it had fallen out of time. Everything slowed, the clatter of dishes, the buzz of conversations, even the distant hum of traffic outside. It all faded into an eerie stillness as Marisol stared at the words the billionaire had just written. I think I know who she is, and I think she came here for me. Her throat tightened. Her palms grew damp. Her heartbeat thundered so loudly she felt it echo in her ears. How could he know anything? He had never met her daughter before. He didn't know her family, her past, her struggles, her fears. He was just a stranger, a powerful, wealthy, trapped in silence stranger. But the way he looked at Alma, it wasn't like someone admiring a cute child. It was like someone recognizing a key they had been searching for their entire life, a key to a locked room inside him, a room filled with things he didn't want to remember. Marisol hugged her daughter closer, her protective instincts flaring so strongly it hurt. She didn't care if this man was rich or influential. Nothing gave him the right to make such claims about her child. But Alma didn't pull away. Instead, the baby leaned forward, stretching her tiny arm toward the billionaire again, as if insisting that something unfinished remained between them. She made a soft sound, a breathy, melodic hum that made Alden's eyes widen with shock. He didn't hear it, but he felt it, a vibration under his skin, a tremor deep inside his chest, a shift in the silence that had imprisoned him for years. And then, without warning, Alden stood. He wobbled slightly, steadying himself with the edge of the table. The room went dead quiet. Every employee, every customer, even the manager hiding by the bar, all watched, transfixed, as the silent billionaire rose to his feet with the trembling reverence of a man confronting a ghost. Marisol instinctively stepped back, fear tightening her voiceless gasp. But Alden raised both hands, not threateningly, but slowly, cautiously, as if approaching something sacred. His fingertips touched his own cheeks, tracing the same spot where Alma's hand had rested moments before. He looked broken, shaken, awestruck, and terrified. He gestured forcefully toward the chair across from him, indicating that she should sit. Desperation flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not impatience. Desperation. But Marisol didn't sit. She clutched Alma and whispered, "What do you want from us?" Even though she knew he could not hear her, he understood anyway. Her expression said everything. Alden moved closer, pulling out his notepad again. His handwriting was wild, frantic, letters jagged as though each one cost him a piece of his sanity. When I was young, someone like her touched me too. Marisol felt the floor tilt beneath her. A cold sweat broke across her neck. Someone like her. What did that even mean? Was he implying her daughter was? But he continued writing, unable to stop himself, as if the truth were pushing its way out, whether he wanted it to or not. There was a child, not a relative, not someone we knew. She came to my father's house when I was 9 years old, a stranger, but when she touched me, his pen hesitated, his hand shook. The next words were written painfully slowly. I heard a voice for the first time. Marisol's breath caught. Her knees nearly buckled. Was he saying another child had restored his hearing once? And yet, he was deaf now. Whatever happened back then didn't last. He continued, his eyes distant, as if he were reliving something too vivid, too heavy. I never saw the girl again. My family refused to speak of it. They sent her away that very day. They said she disrupted the balance of the house. Alden swallowed hard, his jaw tense. A week later, my mother died. Marisol covered her mouth with her free hand. Not because she believed his story, she didn't know what to believe, but because something inside her felt the truth in his trembling. He kept writing. A month later, my father lost everything. Her stomach twisted. A familiar ache pulsed through her chest. She read the next line. They told me she brought a curse. Marisol gasped. Her grip on Alma tightened. He immediately scribbled again, harder this time. But I know now that they lied. He underlined the word twice. She didn't bring a curse. She brought a warning. A warning. The word echoed in Marisol's skull like a tolling bell. A warning. For what? Alden stepped closer, his breath shaky, his eyes dark with a mixture of awe and dread. He wrote a final line, the ink trembling. Your daughter is not like other children. She is here for a reason. Marisol felt the world tilt again. Her vision blurred with fear. She stepped back instinctively. But before she could speak, before she could run, Alma reached out one more time. Her tiny hand brushed the sleeve of Alden's coat, and that single touch shattered something inside him. Because in that moment, in that impossible, unbelievable instant, in the middle of the quiet restaurant filled with people who didn't understand what they were witnessing, Alden's eyes widened, his lips parted, his pupils dilated, and a sound no one else heard, echoed inside the silence of his mind. A voice, a whisper, a calling, a name, his name, and it was Alma's voice. Before he could speak, before he could collapse into revelation or madness, his knees buckled. He grabbed the table for support, gasping in silent shock. But what truly terrified Marisol wasn't his reaction. It was Alma's face. Her expression had changed. No longer baby-like curiosity, no longer innocent wonder. For a fleeting second, just one, her eyes held something ancient, something knowing, something impossible. And Marisol realized with a terror she wasn't ready to name. Her daughter knew exactly what she was doing. As the evening sun filtered through the long glass windows of the dining hall, casting warm streaks of gold across the polished marble floors, Mr. Harrington found himself unable to focus on anything except the tiny hand resting calmly on his sleeve. Emily's presence had become something strange, almost unsettling in its serenity. For the first time in many years, he did not feel the familiar weight of loneliness press upon his shoulders. Instead, there was a warmth, unexpected, uninvited, almost frightening in its simplicity. He stared quietly at the child, watching as she explored the texture of his cufflinks with complete fascination. The world around her did not frighten her. She did not seem to care about wealth, power, or reputation. Her entire universe at that moment was a shiny button on his sleeve, and somehow that innocence dug deeper into his heart than any emotion he had allowed himself to feel since the tragedy that had changed his life forever. Across the room, Rosa stood frozen. She had been summoned earlier, but she refused to step closer, afraid she would be reprimanded, afraid she would lose her job. Yet what she saw before her made her breath catch in her throat. The richest, most feared, most unreachable man in the city was letting her baby sit on his table. Worse, he wasn't pushing her away. He wasn't calling security. He wasn't shouting her name. He was silent. And in that silence, something ancient and painful inside him seemed to tremble. Then, without fully thinking, Mr. Harrington lifted Emily slightly and placed her gently on his lap, as if she were made of glass. The dining hall staff gasped in disbelief, not because he was holding a baby, no, but because of what it meant for him. Everyone in that mansion knew his secret. They all knew why he never allowed children inside his private dining area. They all remembered the day his own daughter's laughter vanished from the halls forever. And yet there he was. Emily giggled, tapping his chest twice, once soft, once firm, as if testing whether this stern man was real or an illusion. He couldn't hear her giggle, but he could feel it. Somewhere deep inside, a memory he had tried desperately to bury began forcing its way back. Another tiny hand, another soft laugh, another child who once tapped his chest to get his attention. His throat tightened. His fingers trembled. He felt something break loose. Inside him, something he had barricaded for so many years that he thought it had died entirely. Suddenly, Emily reached up and touched his cheek, slowly, delicately, almost knowingly. A jolt shot through him. His heart pounded, the room spun, his breath hitched. He could feel the vibration of her small voice, even if he could not hear it. A soft hum, a faint vibration against his skin. And then, something impossible happened. A tiny, almost imperceptible sound reached his ears, a sound he had not heard in decades. One so faint he thought at first it was only his imagination, but it wasn't. A single delicate giggle, Emily's giggle. He froze. His eyes widened. The world stopped. He heard it again, this time louder, clearer. A baby's laugh. His heart hammered with so much force he thought it would burst. His breath shook violently. He pressed a hand against his ear, desperate, terrified, overwhelmed. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. The doctors said it was irreversible, permanent, hopeless. But the sound came again, pure, bright, life-filled. He heard her. The baby of a humble cleaning woman had done the impossible. And at that exact moment, as if drawn by a magnetic pull, Rosa finally stepped forward, trembling. "Sir?" she whispered, voice shaking. "Please, please forgive her. She didn't mean—" Mr. Harrington raised a hand, silencing her, not harshly, but with a trembling gentleness no one had seen from him in years. His voice cracked, wavering with disbelief. I can hear her." The room erupted into gasps. A few servants covered their mouths. Rosa stumbled backward, tears forming instantly in her eyes. Mr. Harrington looked down at Emily again, his hands shaking violently as he held her just a little closer. He could hear her, not just feel her laugh, hear it. Something was happening, something no one present could explain. And deep inside him, he felt a truth rising, one he had spent years denying, running from, burying beneath work, silence, and pain. But Emily was unlocking it. For a long moment, no one dared to move. The mansion, usually so quiet and heavy with unspoken rules, felt as though it had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. The staff stood frozen along the walls, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding, because they knew they were witnessing something far beyond the ordinary. A moment that defied every expectation, every limitation, every certainty they believed untouchable. Mr. Harrington held Emily gently against his chest, his hands trembling so violently he had to tighten his grip to keep from dropping her. But it wasn't fear that shook him. It was shock, disbelief, and something else he had forgotten how to feel. Hope. The faint, crystalline sound of Emily's laughter echoed again, soft, light, almost like a breeze brushing against glass. He pressed his fingers to his ear, hardly daring to breathe. It had been so long, so impossibly long, since he had heard anything but silence. His world had been muted for years. His memories had been trapped behind a wall of quiet grief. His heart had been locked away with the sound he once cherished most, his daughter's laughter. Now that same sound, reborn in a different child, broke through him like a flood. "I can hear her," he whispered again, as if saying the words out loud would make the miracle vanish. His voice cracked, tears threatening to fall, tears he had not allowed himself in decades. Rosa could no longer contain her own tears. They streamed down her face as, she stepped timidly forward, hands pressed to her chest. "Senior Harrington, please, I don't understand. How is this possible?" But he wasn't listening, not because of his hearing, but because his mind was racing, unraveling knots of pain he had spent half a lifetime tightening. He lifted Emily a little higher, staring into her bright, curious eyes. Those eyes held no fear, no judgment, no awareness of the miracle she had become. He heard her laugh a third time, clearer, sharper, unmistakable. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the table for support as reality warped around him. His gaze lifted to the ceiling, as though seeking answers from a universe he had long ago stopped believing in. For years, he had swallowed every emotion, every memory, every trace of what he once was. His daughter's voice, her laughter, her tiny footsteps. He had forced himself to forget all of it after the accident that took her away and left him in irreversible silence. Doctors had been certain. The diagnosis had been final. Hearing gone, permanently. And yet, Emily, tiny, fragile, innocent Emily, born to a humble woman who cleaned his floors, had done what science had declared impossible. He heard the rustle of her little dress. He heard the soft gurgle she made as she played with his tie. He heard the tiny hiccup that followed her laughter. These were not hallucinations, not memories, not ghosts. They were real. A sense of awe spread across the staff, some whispering prayers, others gripping each other's hands in disbelief. One elderly maid crossed herself, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's a miracle," she whispered, "a true miracle." But for Mr. Harrington, this moment was more than a miracle. It was a confrontation, a force dragging him back to the part of himself he had tried desperately to bury. Memories returned like crashing waves, his daughter running toward him, her laughter filling the garden, the day he promised he would always listen to her, and the day he never heard anything again. The silence after her death had been unbearable. The silence had become his prison, and yet now a baby he barely knew was dragging him back into the world of sound, cracking open a door he believed sealed shut forever. Rosa finally found the courage to step closer. "Mr. Harrington." "Sir, Emily didn't mean to disturb you. She doesn't understand who you are. She doesn't know the rules. She saved me," he interrupted softly. Rosa froze. He swallowed hard, trying to steady the tremor in his voice. "You don't understand," he continued, voice thick with emotion. "I lost my hearing the same day I lost my daughter. Everything fell silent at once, and I accepted that. I accepted the silence." Emily gently patted his face again, once, twice, mimicking the rhythm she had done earlier. The simple touch nearly brought him to his knees. "I haven't heard a child's laughter since—" He couldn't finish. The grief was too heavy, too old, too sharp. Rosa covered in her mouth, collapsing into silent sobs. Never in her life had she imagined that her tiny daughter, her baby, could carry such a weight, could open such a wound and heal it in the same breath. The staff watched with a reverence usually reserved for holy moments. They knew the pain he had endured. They had witnessed the transformation of the once gentle father into the stern, distant man he became. But Emily had reached a place no one else could. Suddenly, as if sensing the emotional storm around her, Emily reached both tiny hands outward toward Rosa. Mr. Harrington hesitated, the fear of losing the sound tightening in his chest. What if he never heard anything again once she left his arms? What if this moment disappeared as quickly as it came? What if the miracle was temporary? But miracles are not meant to be held by force. He gently handed Emily back to her mother, his hands lingering for a second longer than necessary, afraid to let go of the one thing that had brought him life again. And then it happened. Emily laughed, bright, crystal clear, while already in Rosa's arms. And he heard it. Even separated by distance, he heard it. His legs nearly gave out. His heart pounded in his chest like thunder. A sob escaped him, raw, unfiltered, human. He fell into the nearest chair, covering his face with both hands, as the impossible truth sank into his bones. He could hear again. Not perfectly, not fully, but enough. Enough to feel alive again. Enough to feel human again. Enough to believe again. And as Emily rested her head against her mother's shoulder, one thought echoed in his mind, louder than her laughter, louder than his heartbeat, louder than the room itself. Why her? Why now? Why this child? What connected them? What force had brought this miracle into his home, into his life, into his broken heart? There was more to this story, much more. And the answer, the truth behind why Emily had awakened his silent world, would only be revealed in the final chapter. For a long time after Emily's laughter drifted through the vast dining hall, no one dared to breathe too loudly, as if even the smallest sound might shatter the fragile miracle unfolding before them. Mr. Harrington sat motionless, hands trembling on his knees, trying to absorb the reality he had just stepped into, a reality he never believed he would touch again. The staff lingered silently at the edges of the room. Some were crying openly, others pressed their hands together as if in prayer. There was a sense that they were witnessing not just an emotional moment but a turning point in the life of a man who had spent years drifting through shadows. Mr. Harrington slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, glistening with tears that seemed older than time itself. His breathing was uneven, as though every inhale carried pieces of memories he had long buried. "Rosa," he said in a hoarse whisper. She held Emily close, instinctively shielding her tiny body even though no danger was present. She had never seen this man, this powerful, feared, unreachable man, look so small, so vulnerable, so painfully human. "Yes, signore," she whispered, her voice trembling. He stared at Emily as if she were a bridge connecting him to a world he believed forever lost. I heard her. I truly heard her. And I need to understand why. His voice broke again. Help me understand. Rosa swallowed hard, her arms tightening around her daughter. I don't know, sir. Emily is just a baby. A sweet baby. She doesn't have special abilities. We're just simple people. I clean floors. I wash dishes. He shook his head strongly. No, this is not coincidence. You don't understand. For years I tried everything. Doctors, specialists, therapies, experimental treatments. Silence was all I had left. His voice softened. Until she came. Emily babbled softly, her tiny fingers brushing Rosa's chin. She was completely unaware of the weight of the moment, unaware that her laughter had shattered a man's darkness. Then Mr. Harrington looked at Rosa, really looked at her, as if noticing details for the first time. Her tired eyes, her humble clothes, the way she held her child with fierce protectiveness. Come with me, he whispered. Rosa hesitated. Sir, should I bring Emily? Yes, he said almost urgently. Bring her. He stood, a bit unsteady, and walked toward the hallway. Rosa followed cautiously, Emily resting quietly in her arms. The staff parted like water, watching with wide eyes as the three disappeared deeper into the house. Mr. Harrington led them to a small room at the end of a corridor, a room no one had entered for years. When he unlocked the door, a faint smell of thyme escaped. Dust floated gently in the air, illuminated by the afternoon sun. Rosa stepped inside, eyes widening. The room was beautiful, but frozen, like a memory trapped in crystal. Baby toys sat untouched. A small white crib stood near the window. Soft pink curtains framed the sunlight, and, above the crib, hanging slightly crooked with age, was a framed photo of a little girl. My daughter, he whispered. Rosa pressed a hand to her heart. She was beautiful, she said softly. She was everything, he replied, his voice shaking. He walked to the crib and gently touched one of the plush animals inside. She died at 3 years old, he continued. A car accident, and the shock destroyed my hearing. Do you understand? The last sound I heard before my world went silent was her laughter. Rosa felt tears forming. I couldn't bring myself to come in here again, he said. Not once. It was too much. The silence of this room was louder than any noise. He turned to Emily, and in that moment, so quiet, so sacred, Emily giggled again. Mr. Harrington gasped. He heard it. He truly heard it. He stumbled backward, gripping the dresser for support. The little laugh seemed to fill the entire room, bouncing off the walls, wrapping itself around his heart like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Then he said something neither Rosa, nor the staff, nor even he himself expected. It's her laugh, he whispered. It's the same softness, the same pitch, the same warmth. Rosa's breath caught in her throat. He stepped closer, eyes wide with the kind of awe only miracles can summon. Your daughter's laughter, he continued, voice trembling beyond control, carries the same vibration as mine. It reaches a frequency, a resonance, that my damaged hearing can still recognize. No one else's voice does that, only hers. Rosa could barely speak. But how? Why Emily? He stared at Emily with a mixture of gratitude and heartbreak. Because life, fate, God, whatever there is beyond us, sometimes gives second chances in ways we don't understand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, old, worn, and coated with dust. I was going to give this to my daughter when she turned 5, he said. Now, it belongs to Emily. Rosa shook her head, desperately. No, sir, please, we cannot accept. It's not a gift, he interrupted. It's a promise. He slowly opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with tiny angel wings and a date, July 4th. Rosa cried softly. Emily reached for the bracelet with curious fingers. From this day forward, he said, voice breaking, I will make sure she grows up safe, protected, educated, loved, everything she deserves. Rosa's knees nearly buckled. But sir, I don't understand. Why us? He looked at her with eyes finally free from the stone-cold emptiness he'd carried for years. Because your daughter saved my life. Emotion choked the air. Rosa covered her mouth, tears pouring down her face. Sir, she whispered, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. Just promise me one thing. Rosa nodded slowly. Promise me," he continued softly, "that you will never leave this house again, not as a servant, but as family." Rosa collapsed into tears, clutching Emily tightly as Mr. Harrington gently rested a hand on her shoulder. It was not a gesture of authority. It was not pity. It was not charity. It was gratitude, a powerful, life-altering gratitude born from the smallest, most unexpected miracle, a baby's laugh. And as Emily giggled once more, filling the once silent room with life, Mr. Harrington realized something profound. Silence had not been the end of his story. It had only been the waiting. Now, finally, the sound had returned. The healing had begun. And the family he thought he had lost forever had found its way back to him in a way no one could have imagined.